Alright, well, we're back again for part 2. In order to make sure that this video doesn't become a part 3, I'm going to be doing a little bit of skipping around my collection, because if I showed every single movie that I owned, well, that might take a while. So I'm going to go for the ones that are either special to me, forgotten classics, or just something I want to give an example of. So last time, I remember we were talking about the CBS Fox releases, and there's just a few minor classic tapes that I missed. First one being 2001: A Space Odyssey. This one was released by MGM Pictures. I have yet to see this one. I hear it's a masterpiece, but I hear it's quite a long one at the same time. Maybe someday. But another way that the MGM tapes came out is this. This is very similar to how CBS Fox did it, in the idea that it kind of folds out and the tape is inside. At one time, I actually found a very similar shape for this, for The Secret of NIMH. However, I did not buy it because it was very beat up, but all the same, it's just very interesting to see how different manufacturers tried to compete. And despite the age, it's pretty amazing how well this case is still together. Even if it is a little hard to put the tape in. Next up is just a bit of an oddity. So, we got Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The interesting thing is, the library actually got rid of this one, so it's a rather unique case. And it's the reason why I got my hand here, because I do not want to reveal my location. Anyway, here's the back. Open it up. There you are. You see how it says, please discard? It's a movie I would like to come back to more often. However, I don't really do well with the whole gore humor. But the wordplay is still pretty fantastic. So then, let's keep up with the MGM. And we'll go with The Secret of NIMH. The first in a pretty good run of Don Bluth films. It's interesting. It seems like this guy works in extremes. Either his movies are really good or really bad. I don't think people are going to try to defend a troll in Central Park, if you know what I mean. It beat up, but hey, they got the job done. I was able to actually see this masterpiece for the first time on this tape. We'll keep up the energy with All Dogs Go to Heaven, with the famous big-lipped alligator moment. Now, it's rather fascinating that it's like the standard box, but yet the tape itself looks pretty similar to the really old ones that I showed off already. But then again, I guess that's how Space Odyssey came as well. And once again, there is a little bit more heft to it, which makes it really interesting. And then we jump ahead to The Land Before Time. It's just kind of crazy how many creative minds were in this movie, and it had to succeed. Probably one of the biggest things I love about the Don Bluth movies is his philosophy. He says you can show a kid anything, as long as there's a happy ending. And that, I think, is really good advice, because his movies are rather emotional. They hurt. They're scary. They have a lot of emotions, but at the same time, when you see that happy ending, it's a lot more happier. It feels like you've gone through this epic journey. Something that you had to brave in order to get to that sweet ending. But this is not me just talking about Don Bluth. Well, actually, let's talk about him one more time with Anastasia. It's kind of funny to think now that Anastasia, most people saw as like a ripoff of a Disney princess, and now that Disney owns 20th Century Fox, she is a princess. It's a rather unique case, too, in the idea that it's puffy like some of the Disney ones, but in its own way. Next, we have probably the weirdest movie I have ever seen in my entire life. The Beatles' Yellow Submarine. Part of me always wanted to challenge myself to try to figure out how to review this thing. I guess in brief, the best way I can describe it is, imagine you just dropped a bunch of acid and then decided to listen to the greatest hits of the Beatles. I'm pretty sure you would probably see maybe half the stuff in this movie. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's hard to talk about because it's just so bizarre. So the next one I know I've done a review of a while ago, but I just want to show one more time. The Last Unicorn. This right here, I feel like, is a classic that sadly is very underappreciated. And you know what? I think I'll just mention this one as well. American Tail, Five Goes West. Once again, really good cover art. It's about 50-50 whether this is a good movie or not, but I don't think anybody is going to deny that this is a really good piece of animation. It's very smooth. It very much did Don Bluth proud, even though he really didn't work on it. I wonder how he felt about the movie. So then, this one I probably bought more out of curiosity. The Little Mermaid. Once again, this is one of those movies that's kind of changed meaning for me as I've gotten older. I feel like aerial struggle is something that can be very much associated with people that are in the Alphabet Soup Committee. But the main reason I wanted to get this particular version is because it's the band cover art. And here, I'll just zoom in there and see if you can figure out what's wrong with it. And on top of that, I remember we had a copy of this at my parents' place. And I remember that there was a little featurette showing the making of Beauty and the Beast. Kind of the idea of the storyboards, rough sketches, and even some of the backgrounds, but unfortunately I was not able to see it on this tape. But all the same, fantastic movie. And you can see why it started the Disney Renaissance. With the recent reboot, I think DuckTales has kind of come back in popularity. And it's really weird to look at this now because obviously back in the day, people were saying, ooh, it's trying to capture Indiana Jones for like the same type. The idea of Scrooge is wearing a fedora and all this other stuff. And now that Disney owns Indiana Jones, it's weird. It's like you kind of bridged a gap or something. Probably the big thing I like to mention about this movie is for a while, this was all I had when it came to DuckTales. This was my exposure to it, so I at least got the basic characters. But it wasn't until many years later that I was able to get the DVD set, Disney Plus, and enjoy this masterpiece of a show. And this one I just always love to talk about. The Rescuers. This is my favorite of the classic animated Disney movies. And if you want to see more of my opinions on it, feel free to watch my review. I will admit it's a little cringeworthy watching it now because, well, I'm wearing a dress, I look half manly, and my hair was probably about this long at that point, so just be warned for that. Maybe I'm the only one that finds it cringy. Now, as loyal followers of this channel would know, I am a huge Digimon fan. In fact, if you look at my channel's logo, that is one of the Digimon wearing a sweatshirt. I just love that picture and I just seem to use it for everything. Now here's the crazy thing is, there's actually two really crazy stories about this movie. The first, many years ago, I remember at an aunt's and uncle's house, we were watching this movie, which was just utterly fantastic, and I wanted to see more of it. However, I can never remember the title. The main thing I did know is that there was a big gold creature on the cover. And so, when I found this at Blockbuster, I figured this must be the movie. I popped it in and I immediately realized that this was not the movie that I was looking for. Even now, I still have no idea what movie that was. The only thing I can say for sure is that there was two gold beings on the cover, kind of similar to this, except etched into the gold looked like Mesopotamian cuneiform, or maybe even Egyptian hieroglyphics. There was like a big one on the cover, and it had like a square head. I remember it was flying above what looked like either a stray comet or a moon, where there was like a whole bunch of little kids standing at his feet. And then the other thing as well is that there was another smaller gold creature flying off in the other direction. As for the title of the movie, I remember it was written in gold letters, but carved in with that same alphabet that was carved in on the big guy. And the other big thing I remember is that it was holographic. The idea that if you hold it in the right light, there'd be like little stars here and there and stuff like that. I have yet to find it, so if you have any ideas what I might be talking about, I would love to hear it. That's like the biggest chapter I want to close on my life. But as for Digimon the movie, when I started getting into the series again, I very much sought this one out. And I was pretty lucky, because I actually had to take the saran wrap off of this one. I'm still kind of kicking myself I didn't make an unboxing video. I was actually able to get this sweet movie poster on the inside. Now, I've had this actually unfolded for a while, but I just wanted to show you how it would have looked brand new. Someday I hope to find a frame for this. And it's kind of annoying because of the stickiness that there's a few areas where the colors aren't coming in alright, but that's something to be expected. All the same, it's a fun little bonus. That's something I've really seen in a whole lot of other movies. And then on to my other Digimon movies. You know, I just kind of thought about it, but the original first season of Digimon was dubbed by Saban and released through Fox Kids. Disney now probably owns the first and second season. I do know for sure that they dubbed the third and fourth season. I'm not sure who dubbed the fifth season, but it's kind of crazy to think that now Disney has a rival to Pokemon now. Listen to me, I sound like a business executive. So I figure I'll just kind of go around. I remember I showed this tape in action because it's just an interesting bit of memorabilia. And much like the Anastasia case, you can see it's puffy, but in a different way. And then a little bit later, I found Volume 3. It annoys me that I never had the chance to find Volume 2, but all in good time, perhaps. So, this is the cover, and I believe I also gave a demonstration of what this one looks like when played. Open it up. There's the tape on the inside. Now here's probably the thing that's crazy, is when I picked up Digimon the movie, still in the saran wrap, I also picked up a collection of Season 3 episodes on VHS. Now this one I am very certain that I never did a demonstration of, although I do remember using footage of this when I reviewed Season 3, just as a way to pick up the footage a little bit. Now this next one I have here is a collection of potentially obscure movies. The Pink Panther Saga. Now, a lot of people might know about the early 2000s remake and its sequel, but the crazy thing is, it was based off a pretty long library starring Peter Sellers. Here's the main thing to mention if you ever want to get into the series. The first movie, just entitled The Pink Panther, skip it. It is so unbelievably dull. The humor is good when it's there, and the action is fun when it's there, but it is so slow. I would start up with A Shot in the Dark myself. From there, I feel like they found their footing. They knew how to do the comedy, they knew how to pace it a little better, and they knew how to do the action. Now, the other thing to mention as well is, even though this one is a lot better than this, just know that the rest of them are all kind of slow-moving, at least by modern cinema standards. And the other thing to mention as well is that sensibilities were not as they were today, so there might be a few things you might find a little insensitive here and there. And the last thing to mention as well is that even though this was made in the 60s and these were all rated G, just know that they got away with some rather racy stuff. I mean, there's one where Clouseau finds himself at a nudist colony, for goodness sake. However, that's not all of them, that's the bulk of them. After that, we have The Return of the Pink Panther, which, if you're like me and you grew up with The Sound of Music, you'll recognize the main villain as Christopher Plummer. And it's just so weird to see the dad of the Von Trapp family is the big baddie. But then again, I would have never guessed that it was Christopher Plummer that played Charles Mutz in Up, and I believe he also did some voice work in Skyrim. I have just a few more miscellaneous tapes I want to show you, and then I'll be skipping ahead to what I have on DVD and Blu-ray. So, The Muppet Movie. The main reason I always like to point this one out is it's really amazing. This has got to be the first movie I've ever seen where the main character gives this giant heartfelt speech. And the villain sits around for a little bit, thinks about it, and says, "All right, kill him." I've never seen that done in any other movie, and I love having my expectations subverted like that. It's a hard thing to do, which I think that's why it hasn't been done in too many other kids' media. This one has a really special place for me. So, my older brother knew I was a big fan of the GoldenEye video game. Of course, who wasn't? And there's even people today who I ask, who isn't? It has quite a legacy. But I had no idea it was a movie. So for one of my birthdays, my older brother gave me this, and we watched it together. This is one of those things that I will keep in my collection for as long as it will stay. There's a good memory there, because it's not very often that I get to see him anymore. This is an obscure one that I like to mention, Journey to the Center of the Earth. The main reason I love mentioning this one is I read the book, and I've seen this movie. And even though both are rather different medias, somehow I feel like this works. In the Disney version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I felt like I was being robbed of some really great scenes. But yet, Journey to the Center of the Earth? Not so much. There were a few little scenes here and there I missed, like the idea of the professor's assistant having to go up to the highest steeple to get used to high altitudes and stuff. But that's such a minor thing, and it's definitely made up here with how much happens. It is a really fun movie, and I will recommend it. In fact, I think it might still be on Disney+. The Hobbit. I'm not sure how many people know about this version. I'm sure everybody knows about the Peter Jackson version, but would people know that there was an animated version that came out in the 1970s? It's very obvious that this was made for TV because there's so many little breaks here and there, but yet somehow at an hour and a half I feel like it's able to condense the story of The Hobbit, and it doesn't feel like it's too long. It might even feel like it's a little too short at times. But probably one of the biggest things I love about this is if you read The Hobbit, as well as even some of Lord of the Rings, it's amazing how many songs are in the books. And it's interesting that some of the songs are actually here. It's hard to say if they would be up to Tolkien's liking, because I think he might have passed by the time this movie came out. But it's a very different interpretation. And anybody that was disappointed by the Jackson Hobbit trilogy, I highly recommend this. Now, the other reason I like to bring this one up as well is rumor says that the animation company that made this one, as well as The Last Unicorn, unfortunately went under around the end of the 1970s. So the studio ended up being bought out by an aspiring filmmaker known as Hayao Miyazaki. Or at least that's how the story goes. You can feel free to correct me. After all, I'm just basing this off of one little thing I heard on the internet one time. Once again, I did a whole review of this, just kind of comparing the dubs, because there is honestly quite a following for the Fox version. There's a little bit for the Disney version as well, but I feel like fans of My Neighbor Totoro are more interested in the 20th Century Fox dub. And up next, we have Kiki's Delivery Service. Now, this one I sorta did a review of. The main thing to keep in mind, though, is that there was actually a dub before Disney did this, and that was done by Streamline Pictures, a very popular name when it came to the early days of dubbing. And even more important is that there's actually 2 Disney versions. So this Disney version I have right here is a little more sought after, as there was a rescore by the immortal, I hope I'm saying his name right, Joe Hisaishi, which some of the fans loved, but the purists hated. And there was also a few ad-lib lines from Phil Hartman as Gigi that got removed in later versions, which I get the idea for purity, but it seems a little sad considering this is probably the last thing he worked on before, well, he died tragically. You can look up that story if you want, but just be warned, it's awful. And the last tape I have from Miyazaki, Spirited Away. For some odd reason, this is the one that seems to get all the fame and all the recognition. And I will agree it's a good movie, but I don't know, I'm just a much bigger fan of Castle in the Sky. And on top of that, I'm under the opinion that Princess Mononoke is probably Miyazaki's magnum opus. Not to say that every movie that came out after that was awful, I'm just saying I think that really showed his talents as a story writer, but also as a director. And it shows. In fact, it was probably the highest grossing movie in Japan up until Titanic took over. I'm sorry, we're talking about Spirited Away, aren't we? So yeah, I found this at a thrift store for 49 cents. Pretty good buy, I would say. And that was how I first enjoyed the movie. And I even showed a few friends with that movie on this tape. So speaking of Miyazaki, this movie is his directorial debut. I did a review on this a while ago, and to be honest, this is the special edition. This looks like something you find at the bottom of the grocery store or even at the dollar store. It's a good movie, but this cover just does not do it justice. The back looks okay, though. But here's the thing, that is the second Lupin the Third movie. This is the first one, which I also did a video on. Now, I can definitely say, like, after watching The Yellow Submarine, I kind of got used to the idea of weird stories, but, I'd say this one is definitely a second. True, it's got a continually flowing narrative, and well, I've seen it so many times now it makes sense. But I will admit, the first time I saw it, I'm just kind of like, what is happening? I like it. Now, as for the new edition, I have the third movie, The Secret of the Gold of Babylon. This one I would put in the same category as The Mystery of Mamo. The idea that Lupin is back to being a giant horn dog, as well as the plot being pretty bizarre, but also having some really awesome action sequences. I would have loved to have done a video on this, however, there weren't multiple dubs, and, well, I'm not sure how well a review of this would work. Maybe in the future I'll think of some way to make a video out of this. And this is my last piece of Lupin the Third memorabilia, some select episodes. I just found these at the thrift store one day and I'm just like, mine. At first I thought they were movies, but when I found out they were episodes of the show, I'm just like, you know what, let's give it a shot, and I like it. I gotta get more. Here's a little fast fact about Lupin the Third. So there was actually supposed to be a spin-off called Lupin the Seventh that takes place in the distant future. However, the show didn't really hit well with audiences, so the animation studio just made Inspector Gadget instead. Bet there was a connection you never thought of. And I figure I'll mention this one as well. Summer Wars. For those of you that's seen Digimon the movie, you might notice that the second story is pretty much the story of Summer Wars, but it's just a lot more fleshed out here. I love this movie, and also coming from a big family myself, whenever we get together, I just think back to that one giant table they have, and there's just so much food to feed an entire army. I might as well talk about a few other anime movies. Now, well, I did a review of this one, and, well, when I first saw it, I was going through a lot at the time, shall we say, and, this kind of helped realize a dream of mine. However, I was honestly quite shocked that at the end of it, it turned out to be a really good story. Like, at first, it just seems like a happy-go-lucky adventure, and then it's like, nope, there's stakes now, there's problems. But when it comes to the same director, I was honestly a bigger fan of Weathering With You. I do kind of wonder why this one is rated PG-13. Maybe it's the scene where the girl, like, undresses and you see her fading away, but I don't know. I feel like this is kind of on par with, like, the level of violence and or scary imagery that you would have seen in the last movie. And maybe it's the idea that the kid was given a gun and that was his good luck charm. No, either way, highly recommend it. So up next I have here is Jason and the Argonauts. Picked this up at a thrift store for like $1.50 or whatever. I feel like this was never a movie that was going to win like an Oscar for like Best Picture. Although I feel like it probably should have won, at least for Best Special Effects or something. A lot of people may know the name of Ray Harryhausen. He was a prolific stop-motion animator, and he worked with this director to create a lot of movies. I feel like this one is probably up there at the top. A lot of people might also talk about Clash of the Titans, but I think this one is the most memorable, if not just for the awesome skeleton fight scene that was surprisingly referenced in Spy Kids 2. And this one right here is a real fun one because it was pre-owned from Blockbuster. And on top of that, I feel like this is another underappreciated movie. One of the biggest things I think about with this movie is it was probably like one of the first things I watched that most people would say was for girls, but I didn't care. It was a really good movie. I love a good mystery, and on top of that, there's a lot of fun action, and also you got a little bit of that soundtrack of the early 2000s, which partially nostalgic for, but also love the sound of. And on top of that, I find myself relating a lot to Nancy Drew, because even though she lives in the present, she very much has a lot of connections to the past. This is the last miscellaneous movie I want to mention. The Guns of Navarone. I have a very weird relationship with this movie, to say the least. So, it was the height of COVID. It was Father's Day. We were just kind of sitting around figuring out what to do, and, well, we found this on free to watch, so we decided to watch it. And all the while, that was the day I put out a little question to Reddit, trying to figure out if I was trans or not. So whenever there was the commercial break here, I would go in to see if I would get some messages. And towards the end, I started to get some responses that really started to open my eyes. So yeah, it's funny that I started to realize I was trans on Father's Day while watching a very manly movie. But let that not take away from how good of a movie this is. It's a long one, but dang it, is it ever engaging. And I figure I'm gonna end this particular series with all the box sets that I have. So I'm gonna start with the biggest of SpongeBob. So this is season 1. Kind of crazy to think that now people could just look all this up on Paramount Plus. But for a while this was all I had, because I didn't really have cable is very inconsistent to actually sit down and watch some of these episodes. And on top of that, it's very interesting because sometimes I go to the store and I see some of the seasons for sale, and it's crazy how different the packaging looks now. We have season 3 here, and I love the idea that you have Plankton trying to break through on the back. You open it up and you realize that it's just a smorgasbord of everything that has happened in season 3, or at least the major highlights. I figure I'll just kind of open this up. You'll see by this time they learned how to shrink down the DVD cases. And then we have the SpongeBob movie. Now, here's a bit of a fun fact for you. When I got this one, it also came with a poncho. It lasted for quite a while, but unfortunately, nothing lasts forever, but still though, it's quite a weird thing that comes along with it. And then, I've also got season 5. Kind of annoying that they couldn't just put it in one giant box. They had to put it in 2 volumes, but yeah. A lot of people say that season 4 is when the show started to go downhill, and well, I will admit, there are a few episodes that are really bad in this season. There are actually still a few little gems here and there. I was talking about DuckTales earlier. Well, these are my DVDs. It's kind of funny. For a lot of people, like when they have a series they like to binge it or something. I remember I watched one episode a week for, I think it was like about a year, using only these DVDs. And not only did that really extend it, but it made me kind of appreciate the series more. The idea that it was something I had to anticipate rather than a chore I had to take care of. And yeah, as soon as I saw that Danny Phantom was out on DVD, I'm just like, I need this in my life. Personally, I would also love to get one of Fairly Odd Parents as well, but I'd only really want probably like the first 3 seasons or so, like basically anything after Baby Poof, not really too keen on. Now, on to something that's become a bit of a modern tragedy. Infinity Train. I did a video on both of these seasons, or books if you prefer, and I even had the chance to do a review on book 3. However, I never did get the chance to watch book 4 before it was taken off of HBO Max. And on top of that, I'm wondering if book 3 or 4 will ever come out on DVD. It's a real shame because this is a really good series. I kind of wish it was a bit longer. I mean, there's only 10 episodes a book, and each one is 11 minutes. Maybe someday I'll be able to watch book 4, but in the meantime, it's just one of those tragic things. I still find it crazy. It all started because I just saw this cover, and I'm like, this looks interesting. I want to see what this is all about. On top of that, I even got my friends vested in the show. Next, the entire series of Hey Arnold. This is actually not bad. I mean, I got all this for like 20 bucks. I think it was like on clearance or whatever, so it worked out very nicely. And on top of that, it has the infamous Veterans Day special on it, which I'm really happy about. And while we're on the subject of Hey Arnold, a lot of people like to talk about the Jungle movie. The final cap to finally end the story of Hey Arnold. I just remember there was so many people that were just like, it better be good, it better be good, it has to be good. And I'm just like, I really don't care. The idea that I've waited years for a proper ending to this thing, I just want the closure. That, to me, is the more important aspect. I figure now I'll kind of delve into the more classic box sets I have. I Dream a Genie. This is just one of those things I'll always remember. When I went up to purchase this, the cashier was just like, aren't you a little young to know what this is? I don't know. I saw reruns every so often. Whenever I was homesick, that was like the one thing that was on after Price is Right. And then after that, you'd have to nap because there was just nothing else on at that point. fun show, and in terms of the immortal Bewitched versus I Dream a Genie debate, I Dream a Genie. And then we have The Adventure of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends. It's interesting to note that I originally saw this on Netflix. Unfortunately, there were a few episodes that just wouldn't stream for some reason, so it was nice to be able to go back and not only relive the epic tales that this series had to offer, but also be able to catch up on the missing parts that I just didn't know about. And now, for probably one of my more controversial tastes, I guess, Hogan's Heroes. I love this show. Now on to some series and anime. So we got Cowboy Bebop here, which I do remember doing a video on a very special episode. Probably the biggest thing I'll say about Cowboy Bebop is I will agree, it's good. I can see why it's held on such high esteem, but at the same time, like, I think it's just a little overrated. Of course, I guess the problem I had is I was interested in the overall story. And there was only about 8 episodes of that. A lot of it was just filler. And some of it was good filler, some of it was just kind of okay filler. It was a little all over the place. But I will admit, that conclusion rounded up everything perfectly, in my opinion. And now on to a rather obscure one, Nadia and the Secret of Blue Water. Well, I also did a video on this, comparing it to Atlantis, the Lost Empire, as it's been considered that Atlantis ripped off Nadia. I mean, I guess there's a few beats here and there, but all in all, I honestly think both of them ripped off Castle in the Sky. But yeah, this is definitely an anime I highly recommend. It's something a bit more on the obscure side, but it's a lot of fun, and it has a really good story. I figure I'll just mention these last two. So, for a while ago, I was doing vlogs on these movies, but it just never really seemed like there was enough attention to them, so I just stopped doing it. Which is really unfortunate, because I love these old Sherlock Holmes movies. And here we go. Last one. Get Smart. I'm not really sure how many people remember this show, but the interesting thing is, it was made by Mel Brooks, who made a lot of spoof movies, and he even made this as a spoof show. Get Smart obviously being a joke on the spy genre that was very popular in the 60s. And on top of that, I just find it so weird that Maxwell Smart, the main character, is also the voice of Inspector Gadget, and they even carry over a few little gags. That is my movie collection, or at least most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. I hope you enjoyed these videos, and hey, maybe in the near future, might get to that coveted 1,000 mark, but I'm in no hurry. Until next time, keep having fun.